I'm back in Miami Shores today. It is another beautiful day here in Miami, as you guys can probably see. It's just one of my favorite areas to walk around. Lots of fresh air coming through here. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about how this banking crisis and the trouble that we're having in the economy is likely going to affect the housing market. Because I see a lot of people saying that, well, you know, this is mainly a commercial crisis when it comes to banks not lending money for commercial loans, and this isn't going to have an effect on the residential housing market. You know, unemployment is still extremely low. It even went down to 3.4%. So people are just not seeing the avenue to a housing crash. So I want to take some time today to point out the avenue that I believe it's going to take. And first of all, guys, we can have our difference of opinions. It doesn't really matter. You know, you can think completely the opposite of everything I say, but respect the fact that I have this opinion and you might have yours. But just realize that my opinion is not based on opinion. It's based on real world data, and history is what I'm basing my opinion on. It's not just a hunch that this is going to happen and this is how it's going to play out. It's just based on the real world facts that we have in front of us. And sometimes I feel like people that don't want to look at that are just looking at a couple little things like unemployment and the fact that housing prices haven't really come down substantially up to this point, that's like their case that there's not going to be a housing crash. Also, the supply and demand narrative. Well, if you follow the supply and demand narrative, if that's something you believe in, which everyone should, then you should also believe that when supply goes up, and it will, especially if the economy continues to get worse, then that will be the point when home prices really start to fall. And if you add in higher unemployment to that mix, that's it. You know, all the dominoes have fallen. Home prices will really start coming down by then. Here's the thing, guys. Regional banks, the small banks that have been closing up shop recently, are the ones that are most responsible for the majority of the mortgages that get lent out in the United States. And if these smaller institutions decide to loan out less money, this hurts availability of credit when people want to buy homes. Like so many people like to point to the supply and demand dynamic, that there's simply just more buyers than there are sellers right now, which is still true. I'm not going to deny that at all. This credit crisis and banking problems that we're having can easily turn that around, because even people that would want to buy a house in this environment have already been priced out due to numerous other factors, just because of the price being too high and interest rates being too high. But now, when you couple that with this banking crisis and the lending standards likely to get a lot stricter on who they're going to be giving mortgages to, that's going to tighten up demand even more. And you got to understand that this is going to have a two-pronged effect with the housing market. On the one hand, you're going to have tighter credit conditions, less smaller banks giving out loans for mortgages because they're worried about going under right now. No bank wants to be the next one to fail at the moment. So the lending standards are going to be tightening up big time. And then comes the recession, guys. Now, most people who watch my channel know that I think we're already in a recession, and we have been since the middle of 2022. But for people who don't think that's true, there is going to be no way to avoid a recession, at least an official recession, in the coming months. And the main reason why is because we have never had a situation where we've had a yield curve inversion like we have right now in the Treasury market, and a recession didn't follow. Even Jerome Powell himself came out and said that the number one indicator in our economy that we have is the yield curve inversion. And when the yield curve gets inverted like that, it's a guarantee we're going to have a recession, guys. So it's not a matter of if, it's when. Just like here in Florida, it's not a matter of if we're going to get another hurricane, it's just when are we going to get one, you know? It's the same thing. And the thing that everyone has to remember about a recession is that unemployment always goes up in a recession. So unemployment is extremely low right now. People look at that as a good thing, and it is a good thing that a lot of people still have jobs. We have the lowest unemployment that we've had in like 60, 70 years, something like that. And the problem is that when the recession does officially hit and the unemployment rate starts to tick up, that's when you're going to start seeing the real problems and things really start to crumble in this housing market, because that's when people can no longer pay the mortgage. That's when they start defaulting on more car loans, more credit card bills, and all different things that they're supposed to pay for. And that's just it. That's when it all starts falling apart. And it's not just me saying that this is all going to happen, guys. This is backed up by some big names in the finance industry. You have Pantheon Economics, Ian Shepherdson, calling for a big real estate downturn. KPMG's Yelena Malayev, she believes that these home prices could come down by at least 20%. Even Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley are calling for a real estate downturn, even though they're thinking it's going to be a more mild one. I've drove past this house and seen the sign in the yard so many times, but never actually walked by it until now. And this actually shows why. They've had this house for sale since June of 2022 for $4.5 million. The listing has been expired since August of 2022, and they've just kept the sign in the yard the whole time, probably hoping that someone would buy it. But that is a pretty steep price tag for a house, even in Miami Shores. And property taxes, they're paying about 12 grand a year. That's on a $1.6 million assessment. So just imagine, guys, if someone pays $4 million for this house, which is very unlikely, but if they did, their property tax bill is going to be over 30 grand a year. So really the biggest reason that I believe we're going to have a housing crash on some level, I don't know what level that will be at, but the reasons why I think that's going to happen is, number one is going to be the recession and the economy continuing to deteriorate as unemployment goes up. And the other reason is because home prices nationwide have become detached from people's incomes. And that's not sustainable either. And you're already seeing a lot of real estate investors starting to default on debt. So it's like the deck is starting to get stacked in favor of this housing crash, but we really haven't seen anything yet. Have we seen prices come down somewhat in some areas? Yes, but we haven't seen a major downturn yet. But I still believe it's gonna happen, because this situation, there's no way it's gonna improve and get better before it gets worse. This thing is gonna have to play out before it's over. There's no way for us to just skip the bad times, guys. This whole notion of a soft landing and that everything's going to be great and we're just going to skirt this recession, and people are going to make enough money to pay for things now and it's all going to be beautiful. That's not a reality, at least as far as I can tell from everything that I read on a daily basis. And I'm just a realistic person. I'm looking at what's really happening and what really happened in the past. And what really happened was, every time that these measures lined up, we had a recession. And when a recession happens, unemployment goes up. When unemployment goes up, defaults go up. But if anybody's out there who does want to buy a house or even sell a house anytime soon, be sure to use my real estate link, guys. I'd like to remind you from time to time, I have a link in the description of all of my videos where you can get a real estate agent all across the country, all 50 states. It's a free service to you, and if you enjoy my videos, it's a way to help out the channel. I will get a commission if somebody buys a house. That's a guarantee. I will get a piece, and it's much appreciated. So it's kind of like a mutual thing. It's my way of saying thank you to you for being a loyal fan of the channel. It's a free service I offer, and it benefits us both. Now, this house here has been for sale since December of 2022. They started off asking $1,395,000, ended up cutting the price all the way down to $1,149,000, and finally they just received a contract a few days ago. So it'll be interesting to see in about a month or two what price this house closes at. How much of a discount did the buyer get? Now let's look at the property taxes. Their assessed value is $913,000. Current owner's only paying $5,500 a year. So it'll also be interesting to see what the new owner ends up paying for property taxes, because notice their tax amount is not going up by much each year, even though the assessed value has, and that's because they have a homestead exemption, which is capped at only 3% per year of an increase. Now, I think another reason that people are not seeing there being any evidence of a housing crash is because we're still hearing about crazy stories, and now you're starting to see some that pertain to bidding wars again. In fact, there was a story this week out of Atlanta, Georgia, where A realtor put up the house for sale. He ended up showing the house 88 times and got 12 offers. He said he didn't even have the sign in the ground and people were requesting showings. And this guy was actually representing some home flippers, and they had several different houses for sale. Apparently, most people who ended up winning the bids on these properties were first-time home buyers that are coming in with FHA loans or VA loans. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing because they deserve to be able to buy a home too. At least it wasn't an investor, right? But that's the problem, guys. First-time home buyers have no idea what's happening most of the time. They barely understand the process of what it takes to even buy a house, let alone what you should be doing when it comes to how much to pay, and getting into these bidding wars at a time like this when the market's on the verge of a big downturn is not that smart, to say the least. And these multiple offer situations are actually on the rise in other places across the country too. It's not just happening in Atlanta. In fact, in November of 2022, 16% of all of the houses being sold had multiple offers. Well, now, fast forward to March of 2023 data, 41% of the homes are getting multiple offers. So that's pretty close to half. It's not half, but it's getting close. But here's another thing to put things into a reality check, guys. Because when the housing market was still on fire in March of 2022, it turns out 72% of homes back then were getting multiple offers. So that is a lot higher than the 41% that we're seeing right now. So things are cooling off. And I think that's one of the main reasons why people don't see the cool off, because they still see these things happening. And especially if you see it in your neighborhood where you live, it can easily put you into the FOMO mentality of thinking, I better get that house now while I can before I can never get it and someone else gets it instead. So that's pretty much the dynamic that's at play here, and it is working extremely well. And of course, this is all brought on by the supply and demand issue, especially when you look at Atlanta. The supply of homes is still extremely low compared to where it used to be. And then you have first-time home buyers like this that don't know the first thing about buying a house or the dangers of really overpaying for one, and they get themselves into these situations, guys. And remember what it said earlier, that a lot of these people are using FHA and VA loans. So what does that mean? Practically no down payment. So even if the market shifts a little bit downwards, these guys are going to be underwater on their mortgages, and we've covered time and time again what the pitfalls of that are. And here's the other danger for Atlanta in particular when getting into this debacle. In Atlanta, around 27,000 single-family homes are owned by real estate investors. Most of these investors buy single-family homes that are under the $500,000 price point, which is exactly what most home buyers are looking for, particularly first-time home buyers. And if you ask me, this is one of the most dangerous areas to be in an over-asking price or multiple offer situation as a buyer, where so many houses are investor-owned, guys. Because one thing you have to remember is these real estate investors, they come in, they pay cash, right? Well, it's not actually cash. Yes, they do pay cash for the home, but it's with someone else's money. Institutional investors, they gather large sums of capital and they buy homes with it. But the problem is, a lot of times, that debt that they borrow to buy these homes is actually some sort of floating rate debt. And now that interest rates have been on the rise, these investors are seeing lower cap rates, so lower returns, which gives them more incentive to sell. And in some cases, the debt obligation goes up so much because interest rates have gone up, they could end up in a forced sale situation as well, where they need to sell their properties just to pay off their debts because it is a floating rate debt. As a first-time home buyer, buying in a city like Atlanta, for example, with a tremendous exposure to real estate investors like this, they could potentially be setting themselves up for disaster, because already having that many investors in this high interest rate environment is a potential concern. But throw in the fact of all the problems with the economy that we just discussed earlier, these guys could be seeing a pretty big downturn in Atlanta. And it's not just Atlanta where this can happen. Any market where we've seen heavy investor activity can easily see the same thing happen, guys. Now here's an interesting real estate story for the week for you. Redfin just added a ChatGPT plugin to their website, and the only people who can use this at the moment are people who are already registered users of ChatGPT, and at the moment there's a waiting list. You can't register to become a user at the moment. But what this new plugin is supposed to do is it's supposed to use artificial intelligence of ChatGPT to try and find a house for you. So the example that they give here is you could go onto this plugin on Redfin and say, I'm moving to Tampa, Florida for a new job with $150,000 salary. Show me 3-bedroom homes for sale with private outdoor entertaining space in neighborhoods with trendy restaurants. Now those are a lot of little tidbits of information and keywords that normally you'd have to tell your real estate broker, this is what I want, and they'll filter down the listings and send you the appropriate ones. In fact, when I was still working heavily as a real estate agent, I used to pride myself in how well I listened to my clients because they would tell me what they would want, and I was really good at finding what they want if it existed, or giving them a reality check if they couldn't get what they want for their price point. And honestly, I don't know how to feel about this. I would love to see the results that this thing would spit out to see how accurate this is, if you can actually really get good results from an AI plugin to see if they're really going to show you the right type of homes that fit your criteria. I'd also like to see if you gave the same criteria to a local real estate agent that's good at what they do, to see if they would actually come up with the same results and put it to the test like that. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if we can see some comparisons like that. Now we all know that this week the Fed did another 25 basis point rate hike, and that was expected. Didn't come as a big surprise. And the labor market is still reporting a strong gain in jobs at 253,000 jobs in April, which is an increase from March. This is another situation where good news can be bad news, because, all right, the Fed may not do any more interest rate hikes for a few more months to see where the economy goes and what's going to happen with this banking crisis. But if these employment numbers stay stubbornly high, I think they're going to come out and do another interest rate hike later in the year, guys, unless things get really bad and we start seeing dozens and dozens of bank failures and we just get thrown into a severe recession/depression overnight. Then I could see the Fed coming in and start cutting rates. If things remain how they are right now, just the general state of affairs, and we keep getting the jobs reports like this, I think they're going to come out and do another interest rate hike, because that's one of the things that's on their chopping block of things to do. They want to make unemployment go up, guys. Their goal was 5% unemployment by the end of the year. So the fact that it's now at 3.4%, it actually went down, that's another driver of inflation that they're going to be looking at tackling. And once again, it's mostly in the service industry. You have a lot of jobs and a lot of hiring in the hotels, restaurants, airlines, just bars and restaurants alone counted for 25,000 jobs, and healthcare was another 40,000 jobs. But once again, no one wants to think about the credit crunch, okay? If businesses cannot borrow money, which many of them cannot anymore in this environment, and that's likely to continue to get worse throughout the year, well, are they going to be hiring people? Probably not. I think the hiring is going to start slowing down once the effects of the credit crunch really start kicking into high gear. And, a business that might normally use debt to expand, open another location, something like that, they're not going to be able to do that in an environment like this. Really, this is a slow moving problem that we have right now. And that's why I think we really haven't seen anything yet. But some people, are of the mindset that because we haven't seen anything yet, that we're not going to at all. But I don't believe that one bit, because all you have to do is look at some charts of history, guys, and you can see that these things take years to play out. This is not something that just changes and happens totally overnight. And that particularly applies to the housing market as well. And even with the job listings, even though they had a stronger job report for April, things are starting to slide in the other direction, okay? But you had job openings decline by 15% between December and March. Layoffs actually increased 22% in that same time frame. So last 3 months, the amount of job listings down 15% and layoffs up 22%. So that's not a sustainable pattern. If you're starting to see more layoffs than job listings, that means unemployment is going to start ticking up. Another reason I think we're going to see major problems with the housing market and the economy is because when you look at wages, this is a big problem, guys. The average hourly wage in April is 4.4% higher than it was a year ago, but that's still less than where inflation is at right now. So even though you've gotten a raise, you're actually still losing to inflation. So that's a big problem with how much things cost right now. That raise actually does nothing for you, and it actually makes you poorer because in many cases, it pushes you into a higher tax bracket with the IRS. So they're charging you more of your hard-earned money in income tax and leaving you even less to spend in an economy where everything is more expensive than ever. So this is my case of why I think things are gonna cool down and there could be a potential housing crash, and why I think it's just getting started, guys. I mean, these problems that we're facing right now are unavoidable if you ask me, and neither the Fed or the federal government can fix any of it either. Can they turn the money printer back on? Yes. Is that actually gonna fix anything? No. It's just gonna make our existing problems even worse, just like it did since they did that in 2008. How do you think we got into this mess and why things are in this situation now? Because that's the choice they made back in 2008. And another time when we can look back at history and see how things really didn't work out so well when they made that poor decision. Just pay attention to the data, guys. Pay attention to the facts. Form your own opinion. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.